Welcome back to another episode of Mormon Traditionalist Podcast. My name is Jaron O'Driscoll, and I am your host. Thanks for joining me again today, guys. Real quick, don't forget to leave a rating and review wherever you listen to this podcast. That will help me out a great deal. And September 23rd through the 25th, the Book of Mormon Evidence Conference, I will be there. I'll be there with my booth as a vendor, doing interviews with some of the guest speakers there. And if you want to come and see me and hang out, please come. I'd be happy to have you, and hopefully we'll see you there. On to today's topic. We talked last week about Leonard Arrington and the spawning of the modern-day faith crisis. And I mentioned a man named William Godbe as an apostate that Arrington spoke positively about. I'm going to tell you all about this guy in this episode. But what's more important than what this guy did is the fact that Arrington propped him up. Keep that in mind as I go through all this, and pay attention to all the links to progressive ideology between these two men, and especially how Arrington admired this man. Okay, many of you probably have never heard of William Godbe, so let me give you a little personal background on this guy. Godbe was born and raised in England, where he was baptized into the church in 1850. He arrived in America the next year and made his way to Utah by the end of that year of 1851. He became a very successful merchant, and by 1860 he was one of the wealthiest businessmen in Utah. Now, at this time, you need to understand that Utah was the state of Deseret. Brigham Young was the prophet at the time and was trying to build a self-sustaining economy for the Latter-day Saints, separate from the United States. Deseret had its own currency, and the members were doing business only amongst each other, so they weren't subject to volatile market problems that plague the U.S. and the world today. Godbe became enemy number one for Brigham Young. He started publicly calling the prophet out on his economic policies and promoting socialistic and even communistic solutions for commerce in Deseret. Mostly, he wanted to become dependent on the United States and started opening up trade with others outside of Deseret. So instead of being independent, he wanted Deseret to become reliant on bankers and merchants. I wonder if he might have benefited from that. His economic policies had connections with Karl Marx. Remember, he's one of Benson's antichrists. Benson said that according to Marxist doctrine, a human being is primarily an economic creature. In other words, his material well-being is all important. His privacy and his freedom are strictly secondary. End quote. Whose plan in the pre-existence does that reflect? Godbe also supported Robert Owen, who was the founder of 19th century utopian socialism. Owen took after John Dewey and started the first community-supported public school in the U.S. I love this quote by the Stoddards in the First Faith Crisis book. It says, quote, Brigham Young was trying to build a self-sufficient, sovereign, and autonomous Zion, and Godbe sought to merge the saints into the world culturally, spiritually, and economically. And guess what economics Godbe wanted to replace Brigham Young's system with? Yep, Keynesian economics. So we've got 3 of Benson's 5 antichrists linked to this guy now. It was in 1868 when Godbe began openly opposing Brigham Young and started their own magazine to do it, called the Utah Magazine, which later transformed into the Mormon Tribune, that later became the Salt Lake Tribune. This is one of the publications I told you on that previous episode that Joseph Fielding Smith said were brought into the world to lie, in his own words. Godbe's followers called themselves Godbeites, and their movement was coined as the New Movement. Super original. Joseph Fielding Smith quoted a historian who said, quote, its only principle, apparently, was hatred of everything Mormon, misrepresenting their motives, assailing their characters, and libeling and lampooning both the living and the dead. Its columns were not only filled habitually with falsehood, but often with vulgar and obscene scandals. This is the Salt Lake Tribune we're talking about, guys. Go and look at the stuff they put out today. They're at the head of the pack when it comes out to anything that might defame the church or speak poorly of the church. They'll be one of the first ones to happily put it on the front page. The Godbeites publicly started this opposition to the prophet in 1869 when they demanded radical restructuring of Mormonism, which included a rejection of the Book of Mormon and Doctrine and Covenants, the rejection of a personal deity, the literal resurrection, and the doctrine of the atonement. That's because Godbe had converted to spiritualism. This is where the crazy stuff starts. He got involved in seances and other satanic practices. He claimed to be visited by Joseph Smith, Heber C. Kimball, Solomon, Peter, James, and John, and others. And all his opposition to Brigham Young seems to be motivated by what these spirits supposedly told him. The spiritual mediums he talked to taught him this, quote, "The spirit suggested that the Doctrine and Covenants filled with the revelations of Joseph Smith was not to be fully trusted. They taught that Joseph Smith had been a prophet, or more precisely and scientifically, a spiritual medium, who imperfectly strained divine light through his untutored understanding, and whose revelations, understandably, were inferior to the new light now being given. The seances told Godbe and his associate and close friend Harrison that they were to lead a revolt against Brigham Young. Go and redeem Zion, the spirit of Joseph Smith had told them. Christ explicitly told them that they must free the children of Zion." Godbe invited noted occultic mediums to lecture in Salt Lake. The Godbeites founded the Church of Zion and tried but failed to get Joseph Smith III, who is the son of Joseph Smith, the prophet Joseph Smith, to be its leader. They eventually let go of all their enterprises, though, except for their Liberal Institute, where they continued into the 1880s to argue for cultural pluralism, racial and sexual equality, and the integration of Utah into the American mainstream. This is where we get into the good stuff here. In 1870, the Godbeites helped found the Liberal Party of Utah to oppose the LDS candidates in political elections. This became the first anti-LDS political party. Godbe focused on political strategies to undermine the Restoration because he recognized that while it might be difficult to convert the Latter-day Saints through doctrine and theology, the backdoor approach would be way more effective by getting the minds of the members on political and social issues. And this persists today, which is why everyone is hesitant to separate politics from the gospel. This was done on purpose, and Godbe was a major instigator. Sorry, folks, but gospel and moral issues of our faith are political. So quit burying your head in the sand if you've fallen prey to this idea. Satan has made this problem even worse, too, with all this political correctness horse crap. Don't let them bully you with that garbage. Needless to say, Godbe was excommunicated in 1869. And just to put the final nail in the coffin here, I won't read them both to you, but both Brigham Young and Orson Pratt called him out publicly. Orson Pratt did it in the General Conference the year that Godbe was excommunicated. And Brigham Young said he was an enemy and called his work a secret combination. So yeah, the guy was a real piece of work. But remember, the biggest thing to take from this is how Leonard Arrington was an apologist for this guy and his work. Remember, Joseph Smith said that there will always be those that oppose the prophets. And just like Brigham Young had William Godbe, President Benson had Leonard Arrington. That's all for this one, folks. Remember to send your questions, comments, and hate mail to mormontraditionalist@gmail.com. And also, you can follow me on Instagram at Mormon Traditionalist and get more content there. And until the next episode, remember, never back down from the truth.